All right, and we are live. Knut Svanholm, thank you so much for joining, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Great to be here. And you pronounced my name more correctly than anyone I've heard before, I think. So thank you.
Say it your way, once, so everyone can hear it right here.
Knut Svanholm.
Knut Svanholm. Oh, I said
Yeah.
Svanholm. Knut Svanholm.
I
So
think you
excellent to
said
have you, my
Svanholm.
friend.
Yeah.
And
Great to
that
be
is
here.
Swedish, right?
Yeah, it is. Even
Awesome.
though Knut is not the most common name in Sweden. Uh,
Gotcha.
so it's more common in Norway and Denmark.
Okay, gotcha. Well, why don't we use that to kind of transition into a bit of your life story because I know it's quite interesting. It involves lots of traveling and big boats and thoughts and Bitcoin. So I'd love to just get a synopsis on that from you.
Yeah, where do you want me to start? At birth?
Let's start with when you first started thinking about money and economics and like the world in this big web.
Yeah, well, we'll have to start at the beginning then. And say,
Let's do
like,
it.
I grew up on the countryside in Sweden, and I spent a couple of months here and there during my childhood in Africa, which was very uncommon for people in that part of the countryside of Sweden at that time. But my father used to work in Mozambique and Tanzania, and so we lived there for a couple of months and half a year at one point. Um, and after I graduated college, I started studying electronics engineering. But I was very tired of school and wasn't really motivated to study, so I quit after a year. I passed the maths courses, but really nothing else. Um, and I was living as a high time preference student person, just partying all the time and not caring about school. So then I was forced to find a job somewhere, and my father was a sea captain, so I got a job at some oil tankers and stuff, and started working my way up uh, as a basically a able-bodied seaman, and then with the goal of getting into the Merchant Marine Academy and becoming a captain, which I subsequently did. The reason for this personally was that I was very interested in sailing. My hobby was sailing old sailing ships, 100-year-old two-masted gaff-rigged ketches, as they're called. I was in an organization that did that with a bunch of kids on board and teaching them how to sail and so on. So, and after I graduated the Master Mariner program, I got a job as an officer on a tall ship, which I thought was my dream job. So I spent 8 years on that ship, sailing around the world, and I didn't have a family at the time, and I've never been very materialistic, so I was kind of fine with just having a laptop and a toothbrush and sailing around the world, seeing different countries and girls, and enjoying myself. So so that was my life for a long time, and I eventually met my wife there as well. And we started a family, and then it was time for me to find something closer to home, because it was kind of rough on the kids or on the marriage to be away for so long. 2 months off, 2 months on doesn't really work when you're in a family situation. So I had to get a job closer to home, and found a company that provides crew transfer vessels to wind turbines in the North Sea and the Baltic. And I started as a skipper on one of those small boats, and that's also where I started writing about Bitcoin, because at one point I had a job where we took the technicians. wind turbine technicians out to the turbines, and they would climb up to the nozzle and then hang in lines next to the wing, down by the wing, and inspect the entire wing, which took all day. So we were just moored to another turbine for like 8 hours, 8 hours straight, where I had nothing to do and the internet connection was bad. And since I can't sit still, I started writing about Bitcoin, because like a year or two before that, I had attended an online course and I was curious about it. I guess my interest in I've always been freedom oriented or libertarian leaning, or whatever you may call it, and the social sciences and money in particular never really made sense to me. So when I stumbled upon this rabbit hole, it's like a whole new world opened itself up. And after I finished that course, I thought, like, okay, I've got all this knowledge now. What should I do with it? And well, at that point, I was also in like, it's kind of hard to get the timeline straight here, but I always played music, and I was in a lot of bands. That was like my main hobby, and I wrote a lot of songs and produced music and stuff like that. And at one point, we had a band that made a single that got promoted by the Pirate Bay. You know, the Pirate Bay had something called the Promo Bay for a couple of years, if you remember that. I don't know if you used Pirate Bay, but
I
I was a
never
freak.
did. I haven't gotten any of those like really old school good sites, but it's very interesting. I'd love to learn more about it.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then as soon as it was promoted there, it got a ton of attention, like 130,000 views in 3 days and stuff. And I was like pressing F5 and seeing the comments and being all, whoa. So that's like the first time I experienced something going semi-viral on the internet, and that was exhilarating for sure. So I started writing about Bitcoin, and one of the articles I wrote took off quite a bit as well. It was one about how to take control of your own keys just before the SegWit soft fork, and the proposed SegWit 2x hard fork in 2017. So in order to tell people how to get control over their own keys, to be able to sell their shitcoin trash for proper Bitcoins, I wrote an article about that. And that got quite a bit of attention. So I was publishing with an online publication called Hacker Noon on Medium at the time. And at one point I decided to, well, that made me keep on writing about the stuff. So at one point I figured I produced enough articles or material to make a book out of it. And I was like just interested in the process of self-publishing, so I just piled the articles together and made a book. Then that book was the only book I had to my name, which I wasn't really happy with, because it wasn't consistent. And you know, when you first start out as a writer, you're not that good at it. Like anything you do in life, you need experience to be sufficiently good to be proud of it. So in 2019 or 2018-19, in between those, I promised myself to write a page a day for the entire year. That was my New Year's resolution. And of course, as with any New Year's resolution, you break it after a certain point, and I broke mine after 106 days. So I wrote this, more of a pamphlet than a book, but a book called Sovereignty Through Mathematics. And I published the first chapter online, which got noted by a core developer who wants to be unnamed, but he pointed out that I could use an editor, and he volunteered to edit the thing, which made it a lot better. So I was very proud of it when the editing process was done. And I ordered, and then I published, and nothing happened. So then I brought 50 copies to Baltic Honey Badger in Riga 2019, and sold 25 of them, and gave 25 of them away to important Bitcoiners. And then it sort of took off, and I got invited to pods and invited to do a lot of stuff. So I kept on writing, and I wrote another book called Independence Reimagined the year after. And then the year after that, I wrote a lot of articles for Citadel 21 magazine, which is Hodlonaut's publication. And one of them had the line, "Imagine everything there is and everything that ever will be divided by 21 million" in it. And Guy Swan read this article on his pod, and then we made a video out of that narration with Joni Appelberg, the animator, another good friend.
Amazing videos. Every time you guys collaborate on a video, it's awesome. I'll throw some of my favorites in the show notes. They're so good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really like them too. I was a fan of Joni's before I even started doing these things, because he's been around for a long time and is still severely undervalued in the space, I think.
Absolutely.
But anyway, that video really took off, and especially the meme. This what I'm wearing on my T-shirt here, the Infinity over 21M meme, that just took off on an entirely different scale, and people started adding it to their Twitter handles, and all of a sudden it was everywhere, and other people were selling T-shirts with this meme on it. So like, hang on a minute, I ought to do something myself about this. So I decided to write another book, a more coherent book and more philosophical book about Bitcoin, and that became the Everything Divided by 21 Million book, which I got right here.
That's the one I got. I read that one when I was living in, where was I? I was in California, and I would drive my car off into the park, and I'd post up with a drink and just kind of read that book. And I have an old tweet of it. I'll throw it up sometime, but it's a great book. I love it.
There's so much to the story of this book. Like this little thing here, for instance. You know what that is?
Is that just like a drawn version of a private key?
That is Fractal Encrypt's private key. Right. So he made like in 2021, in the beginning of August, I went to a conference in Mexico, Ugly Old Goats Bitcoin conference in Mexico. So like you can imagine, like the lockdowns are almost over, but not really. And I'm telling my wife, sorry, but I have to go to Mexico to. Oh, where are you going? Why? This guy, Ugly Old Goats, wants to pay me to come to Mexico and rant about Bitcoin. I have to do this. Oh, really?
You can't say no to that offer.
Yeah. No, yeah, but during that trip in Mexico, I had the idea for a Bitcoin Infinity Day. So I figured that 8 and 21 are almost like everything, this infinity sign and 21. So why don't we like promote this as a Bitcoin holiday where we celebrate like the infinite potential of Bitcoin or whatever. So I announced that on Tonevase Pod in the beginning of August 2021. And just a couple of weeks later, Fractal was already working on this and announcing this as a thing for that specific date, because he was already working on this piece, but it didn't say Everything Divided by 21 Million. It said fuck your shitcoin. That was the prototype. This has the same meaning really, but anyway, so he made 21 private keys and 210 public keys, and the private keys were given away to people who had given Fractal some information about Bitcoin, something he didn't know before. Plus one for me, one for Yoni, one for Guy, one for Sailor, and someone else. And then we decided to auction one out, or he decided to auction one out. And I suggested, why don't you auction out number 8 out of 21, the one that's just like the meme. So he did that, and it sold for 1.05 Bitcoin, if I remember correctly, which was like around $70,000 at the time. And he gave me number 1 out of 21. So my mother-in-law picked it up, and I asked her, "Can you guess how much this piece of art is worth?" And she's like, 500 euros. No, you have to go a bit higher. Hit me with a large. Oh, 5,000 euros. And I'll give you a hint. It's worth more than your car. So that was really awesome. And Fractal is such a great guy and a great friend at this point. So
Bullish
we've,
on him,
yeah,
man. He's next level, dude. He's also got some really cool articles out there just about things other than art that are super interesting that I found. So
absolutely. Yeah, he's great. And yeah, I met him in 2022. I went to Miami. Uh, and met everyone else and just had a great time. But meeting Fractal in person was a real bromance moment, man. What
the
a hug!
Bitcoin conferences are all about just connecting with the people that you keep seeing on the internet and you want to meet them in person. And
Yeah,
something that I've found consistently is that people are exactly the way I expect them or better.
yeah.
Because
I have the same
people
experience.
in the Bitcoin community aren't hiding anything online. They're completely, they,
No,
since they feel so secure in themselves, and it all starts with their money. They're not worried about getting canceled or their bank account taken down if they say things that aren't approved by the government. So they can say
no.
whatever they want, and they're their whole selves.
Yeah, and as they say, honesty is the currency of the future, and I really believe that. I believe the success of a guy like Joe Rogan, for instance, is because he's honest. And
Yeah,
you sort of have to be honest if you're producing a lot of content, because like playing some charade won't really work in the long run. And
it just
Bitcoin is,
becomes too impossible. There would be too many forks of truth and
yeah,
fiction. Yeah.
yeah, and Bitcoin is honesty, so you can't
Hmm.
lie. Like it's impossible. And also like the playing field is really leveled, because like uh it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or if you're a bum. Like it still unlocks this ability to just not give a fuck.
Yeah.
And that's great, because what matters is your ideas and what you've done, and if you're a good person, basically. And
Hmm.
yeah, I'm so happy that this whole thing happened to me. I didn't plan for any of it, but it's sort of like it was all just dipping my toes in some unknown waters, and all of this happened, which is, yeah, very humbling.
And I don't think you get enough credit for being a natural marketer. Like you really found these great avenues to get your stuff out there and do it properly to get the attention it deserves, which I think is super cool.
Oh, really?
Um,
I don't
all
feel
right,
like that. I
awesome.
feel
Well,
like this sort of just happens. Another thing, another little
yeah,
anecdote about this before we go on, is that I
sure.
realized in hindsight that the article the meme came from was published on August 21st the year before. So August 21st, 2021. That's when the article was
Unintentionally?
published, unintentionally, and that's just fucking. I
That's
mean,
just poetic.
yeah, yeah, and well, I mean, all of those Citadel 21 magazines were published on the 21st of a certain month, but it was just random that it would happen to be August.
That's
So
awesome. I love it.
it's the story is just it's better than it deserves to be.
That's beautiful. So cool. Well, awesome. I appreciate that backup story here. So I'd love to transition into some good and meaty goodness here. And as I explained earlier, I'd love to just set some historical foundation here on uh, why Bitcoin is important, why it helps the world. And one of the things you've written extensively about is the separation of church and state as a great example we can look back on as something that a huge paradigm shift that the world went through that created more freedom for more people. So
Hmm.
could we start there? Could you explain to those who haven't heard of that before, don't really understand what happened? What was the separation of church and state and why was it so significant for the world?
Uh, yeah, it's it's kind of sad now, since the state has sort of replaced organized religion as the go-to fictional belief system to cling on to. But like the whole thing was basically from a U.S. perspective, in particular. It's the ideas of John Locke, and of how to get people from different creeds and different religions to get along with one another. And he figured out that, okay, if we separate this thing and we allow for all religions to coexist, we can do that peacefully. And it worked for very good for a long time, because the state-run churches had a lot of power at one point, and then I guess the power was given more to the people to make their own choices. Unfortunately, high taxes and higher and higher taxes and higher inflation has sort of made the state replace the old churches as the money grabbing institution of the day. I mean, I view the central bank as sort of the successor of the idea of an afterlife, because the idea of an afterlife is sort of a celestial money printer in a way. You're given this promise that if you do these good things, whatever these things that I write down on the list here is, you can get a better life in heaven. And the central bank is making the same promise, but you're promised a better life here and now, and that there is a free lunch, which there isn't. So you're not becoming a rock star or a movie star or anything like that. You're just stuck in the hamster's wheel for as long as they can
And you
run the
don't
money
get
print.
thrown in jail, so you should be very happy.
Yeah. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to look back on how these giant power structures just kind of transition from one to the next throughout history. And
Yeah.
I didn't have a very religious upbringing, so I didn't really understand that story until I got into Bitcoin and started learning it, because a lot of people use that as a reference of, you basically have these giant institutions that control the communication of
Yeah.
the word of God and whatever the other religions have, and they have all the power. They really indoctrinate into people that you have to come to us and give us money in order to get the word of God.
Yeah.
And then when people the printing press, I believe, was the main driver of change there, because all of a sudden they could
Yeah.
print all these Bibles, and then
Yeah.
everyone could go do their own thing, and all of a sudden you didn't need these institutions anymore, and they were panicking because they're losing their power, because it really
Yeah.
was all about power in the first place. And that's why I think it's such a perfect example of what's happening right now, just differently.
Yeah. And then we can never know if, like, Bitcoin or the scientific method or anything else really happened because of Christianity or despite of it. Uh,
Right.
because we're living in the timeline we live in, so we don't know what caused what. We know that the Catholic Church did a lot of dodgy things, and also, like, the example I like to, or one example I'd like to give, I often give, is the invention of ceremonial burial. You don't really see
Hmm.
civilizations expand and, like, tribes killing other tribes and forming these larger nation state like structures until they invent ceremonial burial. Now, why is that? Because and that is because you couldn't fool 18-year-olds to go and kill their neighbors if you didn't have something to fool them with, and that was the thought of an afterlife and, like, 17 virgins in heaven and whatever. Um, if you go and do this in the name of God, you will get a better life in heaven. And I think ceremonial burial was partly, at least, invented because of this power structure. Whoever got to decide over the rituals got to decide over a lot of other stuff as well. At least
Yeah, it's like you
it
have to
it gets
fabricate an
hijacked.
incentive.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
uh,
you need to give people incentive to do the thing that you want to if you're in power. So
yeah,
in order to do that, you have to like craft some idea that you can plant in their brain, sometimes over many years or generations, that if you do this thing we want you to do, then
yeah,
you will earn a reward for it,
yeah.
essentially.
And like, modern day, the equivalent would be, I don't think these things are really, they don't begin as conspiracies and someone scheming. It's just that they incentivize people to use that for their own gain, and then it becomes a system that favors the wrong people. So it's the same with like climate science, which was probably like some scientists noticing a pattern and telling others that, hang on here, this doesn't look good. And now fast forward 40 years and you have a whole class of political elites using that for their own benefit, so they can fly to Davos in their fucking private jets and have steak dinners and tell everyone else to eat bugs, and that somehow politicians will fix the weather. And like, that's not what the that's probably not what the first scientist who noticed this envisioned in what the telling other people about it would have led to. If he knew, he probably would have never told anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when it's all just happens when the opportunity to grab more power comes up, it seems
Yeah.
like everything else goes out the window and things start angling more toward that direction of how can we get more power. And I've been
Yeah.
really deep down the diet rabbit hole. So the fact that you bring up the, you know, the meat for the meat for the elites and bugs for the peasants basically
Yeah.
is this direction we're definitely going toward right now, because they found out, oh wow, if we just completely like rug pull the people's nutrition, all of the testosterone levels have been going down for years and decades, and the all of a sudden people they don't have the energy to revolt. So they're
No.
seeing this opportunity here, and of course there's some speculation like, are they doing this exactly for this reason? Who knows? But that's the direction we're going, and the incentive to me is clearly there. If people are less healthy, then they're less likely to revolt and tear these systems down, which are clearly unfair and so hypocritical. Like you're talking about the politicians all flying their private jets constantly and telling us to, recycle. It's crazy.
Yeah. That's the vodka was almost free in the Soviet Union for the exact same reason. They wanted to keep their population drunk, because as long as they were drunk, they couldn't revolt, or they wouldn't revolt. So
Bread and circus. It
Yeah.
just keeps coming up over and over. Just keep people drunk and happy and fat, and they're less likely to cause problems to the power game that they're building. So it's
Yeah.
very interesting stuff. So using that background of the separation of church and state, let's dive into the separation of money and state, because we've sort of been dancing around that here. So you talked a little bit about central banking. Maybe we could actually start with, what is the state of the economic world right now for the majority of people? I know there are a lot of people out there who have heard of inflation. They know that it is, when they see the prices going up at the store, that's inflation, but they're not really sure what's causing that. Like, if there's someone we can blame for this, if there's some politician we can put in that will fix it for us. So, what is inflation? What's actually going on behind the scenes of the prices?
Inflation is the dilution of the money supply. That's or the dilution of the value of money. So an inflation has a linear relationship with how much money there is in circulation in society. It's as easy as that. Everyone pretends it isn't, but it is as easy as that. Like, if you could end poverty by printing money, why not just print the double amount and see what happens? Which is almost what they're doing, by the way. So we're living in a world where most of the money is debt. Like the world has like 5 times more debt than resources, and our kids will have to pay for that. The bill is coming at some point, and it's not gonna be a fun thing to live through. It's gonna be ugly. And luckily now we have this life raft on the Titanic, which is Bitcoin, which can bring us back to something more real. And the separation of money and state is literally the if you see the state as the appendix in the I'm gonna find a better metaphor, but it's really the separation of the state. Exclamation mark. Just separate that and everything will be fine, or better at least. Because right now we're living in a world where the path to becoming wealthy is always colored by some type of measure of how politically connected you are, and not to which extent you can provide goods and services to the best quality of the best quality for the lowest prices to your fellow human beings, which is what it should be. But it's, since coercion exists and since inflation exists, which is a hidden tax on everyone, especially the poor, who have to pay higher prices for everything, then the game is totally rigged. Um, and with Bitcoin, you have something that is really at its core in people's heads. It's not anywhere else. Like if you know your seed phrase, or if you know your passphrase to your hardware wallet and the location of your hardware wallet or whatever, but if you hide it well and the information about where it is in, or how to unlock the Bitcoins, so to speak, is in your head and in your head only, then you have the option to say no if someone says, give me all your Bitcoins. And then they can't get the Bitcoins, because if they shoot you, there's no way to get your Bitcoins. Which is not the case with physical assets, because you can shoot the guy and take the stuff. So you have moved the Schelling point of violence, and I think this is such an underrated feature of what this thing is, because that means that it's more profitable to you to just provide something of value back to this person than try to take something by force. So there's like free market incentives on steroids, because so thievery and or theft and taxation and coercion, they're not as effective anymore. Bitcoiners are immune, and I think
Right.
that's really beautiful.
And that's one of the things I discussed with Robert Breedlove too, is how the main driver and incentive for entrepreneurs and businesses now is no longer to provide a good service to people to get their money. It is to get, as like you said, as much political connection as possible, so they can just have their share of the money printer, and just it's much more profitable that way. They just get showered with money,
Yeah.
and they don't really care anymore about providing good services for people because it doesn't matter. They just get
No.
free money.
Yeah, and the state and the central bank and the largest corporations are all parts of the same machinery. BlackRock and Vanguard owning almost everything, and like it's very it's very dodgy how the whole thing works. And like resources are misallocated on such a enormous scale because of this deceit, and it's really awful. But Bitcoin provides a good solution.
Something I'd like to inject into this conversation is the idea of time and time preference, because you talk about that a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
Last night, when I was sort of getting ready to chat with you, I was listening to one of your older recordings with Cedric Youngelman on the shout out to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. Great one. This is a quote he actually pulled, and I straight up copied it because it's so good. So this is from you, from your book. You said, long-term thinking is a luxury for those that can afford it. Few today can, since the rules of every nation change over time. New laws are written and new rules come into play every day. This phenomenon alone forces us to adopt a higher time preference, to think more short term. The fear of losing what we have makes us more irrational and egoistic. When we first lay our hands on something that cannot be taken away from us, we can allow ourselves to be less self centered, less fearful. When we're less afraid, we can prioritize the well being of ourselves and our families. What is the opposite of fear? It's love. And I love that because it puts the pieces together of why us crazy Bitcoiners are always talking about like Bitcoin is love and Bitcoin helps bring people together. To people who haven't really dove into the guts of this thing, it doesn't really make sense to them. It sounds like we're crazy. But that puts it all together. Like it's really just shifting the incentives that are going on, giving people something that can't be taken away, like you said, And I'm sure you've met people like this too. I've met people at Bitcoin conferences who have escaped horrific authoritarian regimes in other parts of the world just
Yeah,
because they had their 12 words in their head and they can't be robbed. Like when people are trying to escape terrible places like that, there's corruption at every turn. There's police, and the police are corrupt, the gatekeepers are corrupt. On their way out of the country, they get everything taken away from them. But if they had Bitcoin, they literally just have words in their head that can't be taken away. So they
yeah,
were able to leave and find a new life somewhere else.
yeah. You know what? Like that's one of the one of my greatest memories from this whole journey is when I got a message from a guy that had fled Venezuela with 12 words in his head, and he thanked me because my writings had inspired him to do exactly that. And that just, I mean, I was so blown away by that, and like, holy shit, I can sit here in my bedroom and type some brain farts on a keyboard, and it can literally change a person's life. He can escape, basically a lifetime of slavery. Uh, and if I had any part of that, like, holy shit, this is worth doing. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, this is what I should be doing with my time. Uh, so that was a big trigger for me to keep on writing and keep on producing Bitcoin content. Uh, uh,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And I think that's the goal for so many of us too. Like this is why we do it, because we really care about people. We want to help people.
yeah,
And there's no better way to help people than to talk about things that are interesting and help people just think and like learn how to think more critically and go down the steps that we've gone to do that. It's the best
yeah,
feeling ever. And also tying back in what we talked about earlier, how the incentives are all perfectly aligned too, because
yeah.
you've made these books, you sell the books, you're making money doing this. So you're making money to help people
not
improve their
not as
lives.
much as you think, but it's
But
worth it
still,
anyway.
and
Uh,
like, I mean, I feel the same. I love Stacker News, for example. I write on Stacker News and I get a few sats here and there. It's like, this is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
I don't care how much it is. Like, this is
No,
cool.
no, no. And yeah, to that point about you know uh, uh, rich people being blamed for stuff, or wealthy people
Mm,
being blamed for stuff, like that's common in movies and books and all sorts of stuff, and it's not unfounded, because a lot of people are rich for the wrong reasons, not because they provided goods and services of a high quality to a low price to other people, but they're rich for other reasons, that they were politically connected, or that they were involved in some other type of organized crime. And that of course is not a person to look up to. I think wealth in general has gotten its bad name from this dysfunctional system. If people knew they had a system that would only reward people who deserved the reward, being wealthy wouldn't have such a bad name. And I grew up in Sweden, remember? So being wealthy there in social democratic Sweden was frowned upon. I mean, it's looked down on. Um, and yeah, it's such a strange thing, really.
yeah, I've made Swedish friends while traveling, and they really have that mindset. You could tell,
Yeah,
like when
envy is all over.
Mhm. And it's kind of wild. What was like? Oh, yeah. So one of the things that you said there, just this topic of rich people being demonized and looked down upon. I talked about this with Robert Breedlove as well. How so many people in the world right now look at people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, thinking that they are like the problem. The fact that they exist and they have so much money, they view that as this picture of wealth inequality. Like it's just not fair that someone could have so many billions of dollars when other people can't eat. And
Yeah,
one of the things that I try to help people understand is that this is a classic example of don't hate the player, hate the game, in my opinion. I think that the
yeah,
game is set up to where this sort of wealth inequality, of course, is crazy. And both of them, of course, have like used the game to their advantage. They've, the game is set up in a
Absolutely.
way where it can be manipulated, so they did it, you know. And if you want
Yeah.
to get mad at them for using the tools at their disposal, like, I guess you could do that, but the problem isn't them, it's the game itself. Would you agree?
Yeah. Absolutely. They're not the new Rockefellers. They're something else. Like that, because they're in a system that allows them to get artificially cheap loans at a much cheaper rate than anyone else, and the loan market is completely fucked. Like there are negative interest rates, a thing that provably cannot exist since everyone has a time preference. Some sort of time preference cannot be negative. So people will always prefer money now to money later. So negative interest rates don't work. They can't work. You can prove that. So it must be artificial, and it is artificial as hell. It's the money printing that is driving it, and that's what's making these people so insanely rich instead of just a bit richer than everyone else. I mean, I guess they're their wealth would be in millions and not in billions if well, it couldn't even be in millions if we were on a Bitcoin standard, right? Like, try to acquire 1 million
Yeah.
Bitcoins. Good luck.
Yeah. You better provide a lot of value to people and, like, be extremely helpful, because that's the only way
Yeah,
you're going to get that.
but I don't think it's possible. Like, how, even if you were the richest man in the world, and like, look at Sailor. How many Bitcoins does Sailor have? I don't remember. It's like MicroStrategy
I
Bitcoin
don't remember
holdings.
either. It's big. I stopped counting.
Yeah, but it's not 1 million.
I think it's in the hundreds of thousands. Yeah.
It is, but
Yeah.
how many Bitcoins do MicroStrategy? 174,530. An enormous
Hmm.
number in Bitcoin terms.
Hmm.
But it's going to be more and more expensive for them to acquire. If they're aiming for 1 million, yeah, good luck. There only ever
Yeah.
be
I would
21 million.
agree. Like, in reality, it's never going to happen. But I mean, the fact that it is theoretically possible, you know, if Michael Saylor came out and created the best product imaginable for all these people, so much that the Bitcoiners would say, I would like to have that for my Bitcoin, they would actually trade it, then it
Yeah,
would be possible, but just
yeah.
insanely unlikely.
But the thing is, to get any value out of those Bitcoins, you have to honestly spend them on goods and services. They cannot do
Yeah.
anything else for you. You can't play the system. Like,
Hmm.
maybe in the beginning, whales could play it in the adoption phase and dump and then buy at a lower price, but it's getting increasingly harder to do that. So, and here's a tip. Like, I mean, Michael, I appreciate you a lot, and I'm so thankful for everything you've done for me personally and everything. But don't. Here's the message to everyone else: don't sell your bitcoins to Michael Saylor. Like, just don't.
Yeah. And here's a good opportunity to also bring in another thing that I know a lot of people outside of Bitcoin get hung up on. They say, "Oh, well, it's just a new fiat system because there's a new rich guy, you know, with a lot of the money." And what would you
Missing the
say to that?
point. They're completely missing the point.
Exactly.
And this is like on-chain data tells another story. The addresses with 10,000 bitcoins or more in them are shrinking in numbers, and the addresses with 1 bitcoin or with 1 bitcoin or less in them are growing in numbers,
Hmm.
which suggests that the Bitcoin is actually redistributing wealth by doing the very opposite of those who claim to be doing so are doing.
And most of
So,
the big wallet addresses that people point to are exchanges. They're made up of tons of smaller people. So,
yeah,
like, they don't understand the data they're looking at. And the other thing that I would add as well is that even
don't
if,
keep your coins on an exchange.
yeah, good addition.
Yeah,
But even the fact that there are entities out there with a lot of Bitcoin, the important thing is that that doesn't give them power over the rules of the game. It doesn't give them any.
not at
They
all.
can't change the monetary or the monetary policy at all. So
No.
that's the big difference. Even if, you know, BlackRock or someone came out and bought every single other Bitcoin out there right now, um, they still wouldn't be able to change the game and change the rules.
No.
which at the end of the day, that's like a huge upgrade from what we have right now. Where if you have money, you can change the rules whenever you want. You buy the politicians, you change all the policies the way you want. You can snuff out the competition in your industry easily by just tapping your buddy's shoulder in the Congress and
Yeah.
completely wiping them out with policies. Like I've
Yeah.
seen this happening in the food industry as I've been studying, as these giant food corporations are basically able to just pass down these crazy fines and laws to the smaller farmers who can't afford them. So it's
Yeah.
an easy way for them to just indirectly get rid of all their real competitors and just have a monopoly over their industry, which is a huge problem.
Absolutely. It happens
Um,
everywhere. A monopoly cannot happen on a free market with sound money. It it depends on how you define monopoly, but in the true meaning of the word, cannot happen because like there's always competitors. People choose between different goods and services. So say someone has a monopoly on selling hamburgers. Well, people can choose to eat steak or pizza or whatever instead of hamburgers. So they're still subject to market forces, and there is still competition. What constitutes a homogeneous good is a subjective thing. So the only thing that can create real monopolies is artificial means of creating it. In other words, political means. So you can set up, restrictions on stuff, and you can set up like, all of these ferries here need these and that safety measures, and thereby you price everyone out, price the competition out by political lobbying, so only the big ones survive. Which is basically what happened during the lockdowns. Like a lot of mom and pop stores had to close shop and give way to like the McDonald's and the Walmarts of the world, and it's tragic. It's
the essential business McDonald's.
yeah, exactly. And you can see McDonald's is fascinating. Like if you see what there are no waiters anymore, or waitresses. There are screens where you have to make the order by clicking a fucking ugly screen, and they call it innovation and whatnot. And
Covered in greasy little kid fingerprints on it.
Yeah, and they are a direct result of minimum wage laws. They are they are there because you have to pay minimum wage laws.
This
and
is a
it's
good
not,
topic I'd love to dive into.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not innovation.
what do people misunderstand about minimum wage laws?
They misunderstand that minimum wage laws can't increase the total output of goods and services in society. It's proven that you can logically, deductively reason yourself to the conclusion that a minimum wage law can never be positive for the overall economy. It can, I mean, if it's set low enough, it doesn't make any difference. But as soon as it makes some difference, the thing that happens is that the employer will not employ that person because he can't afford it. And therefore, one job is lost. And as societies work today, that person will have to be paid to be unproductive and sit at home and do nothing and get a paycheck from the state instead, which everyone pays. So everyone's purchasing power goes down by a little. So the total output can never be increased by having minimum wage laws. In a sound money free market economy, there is no unemployment. Unemployment is invented by politicians. If you, yeah, that's the point.
Mm-hmm. Essentially, whenever you try to force one side of a transaction, which in this case it is a business and the employee,
Yeah.
Anytime you try to force them to have things a certain price or a certain place, it's going to cause problems because that needs to be mutually beneficial between the two parties. So
Yeah.
the employer needs to have a real reason to employ that person, which they will pay to do, and the employee will need to fill that role and get paid. And
Yeah.
the Go ahead.
And if there was free market competition all the way to the bottom in the wage scale, the employers would still have to fight for the workforce because they could always choose another job that paid better.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a free market to that too, but it doesn't work if you have minimum wage laws. It's or any other, like, you a consensual transaction is always preferable to a coerced one if you're
Mm-hmm.
aiming for higher total output.
Mm-hmm. And prosperity too, just like because
Yeah,
everyone
that's what
is
higher
getting
total
benefit out of it.
output is. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and another thing we didn't even touch on there is that if these employees are saving and sound money and like earning sound money for their work, they all of a sudden aren't under such stress to get more dollars because their savings actually hold their value over time. Because right now, the reason why so many people are clamoring for higher wages is because I mean they can't afford rent and they can't afford food, so they need more money
Yeah.
coming in. You know,
But
in a sound
this
money
is
world, you don't need this constant money coming in. Your savings actually grow over time, and deflation occurs across the goods and services they need.
well, this is a hard thing to wrap your head around because all prices will shrink because of the purchasing power going up, and that includes wages. So you will earn less and less, and you will be
Mm,
happy,
mm-hmm,
denominated in Bitcoin. Your purchasing power is still going up, but you will earn less and less. It's just inevitable on a sound money standard. So I think that it's a very, very big shift in how we approach the notion of money in general. It's not like gold. It's absolutely scarce. Like, this is
mm-hmm.
different,
It's better.
very
Yeah.
different. And I can imagine a future where most companies are you start a company not to have profits, but to uh, to deact what's the word, to have your stack shrink a little slower than it otherwise would, because you will have expenses, and if everyone just accepts Bitcoin, everyone's stack will shrink over time. It's just
Mm-hmm.
inevitable, and sats will be lost and so on. So everyone's stack will shrink. So you can start a company to have your stack shrink a little less rapidly.
Yeah.
uh, but everyone's purchasing power still goes up. It's just
Mm-hmm.
very
Because
hard to
that's
wrap
all that
your head
matters
around.
is the purchasing power. Like what things people are able to get with the money they have. That's all that matters in the real world.
Yeah,
Like people are so confused with all the big numbers flying around right now. How
yeah.
many zeros are on the end of the account? How many zeros are on the price of things they want to get? And then they turn on the TV and it says, "Oh, the government just printed, a couple trillion so we can go like bomb some children in some Middle Eastern country." And they say like, "Okay, that I'm sure they had a good reason, like whatever." They don't understand that that just diluted their savings. Like,
No,
every single
exactly.
dollar that's printed, like you were talking about earlier,
Yeah,
is diluting the value of every other dollar that exists. So every
yeah.
time the government prints, you get poorer in purchasing power terms.
Yes, and like in Swedish public service media, when Donald Trump won the election in 2016, he was painted by public media as this evil capitalist figure, right?
Hmm.
And then the COVID happened and the lockdowns happened, and he decided to give out what was it, like $1,000 to each American household or something
Hmm.
in newly printed money. And
Sounds great, amazing.
what
Not.
people don't get is like, hang on a minute, he's not a capitalist. He's a total fucking commie, because a central bank is a centrally planned economy. It's planned economy,
Exactly.
and giving out free money is fucking communism, and people keep falling for it over and over again. So like, yeah. Uh,
They
but
use these words. It's just
yeah,
wordplay.
they're so diluted at this point, so it's almost pointless to talk about them.
Yeah. It's just
Let's
they're
go.
all just marketing wordplay, trying to get play on people's emotions, essentially. And
Yeah,
right now, the perfect bad guy is greedy capitalists, and they're the problem. It's not the fact that we're printing unlimited money and diluting your purchasing power, because
yeah.
that's like pretty complicated to understand. So they can just continue lying, and it works pretty well. But being able to
I
blame
mean,
anything else works.
if I could give out an Oscar to like best antagonist, it would be Klaus Schwab. He looks looks and plays the part perfectly.
He's the
Like
Bond
you
villain.
can't come up with that guy who's
Yeah.
yeah
It's the perfect Bond villain.
Something between a Bond villain and a Star Wars villain. That's what he
Exactly.
is.
I just pulled something up that I'm really excited. I was going to pull this out during my interview with Robert Breedlove, but this is an even better time to pull it out. This is from my friend on Twitter, Muslim Bitcoiner. He's a really great dude. He tweeted this out a while ago, and I saved it because I thought it encapsulated a lot of the things we're talking about very well. So I'd love to get your thoughts on it. It's a little bit long, but he
Hmm.
said, people are so quick to blame capitalism for why corporations tend to consolidate and get so large and influential, but it's really the subsidized capital stripping incentives caused by fiat money. The money devalues under the socialist policy of inflation, credit expansion, so profits need to be made right now, not later. Why accumulate capital to seek long term sustainable profits when a company can just cut corners in the production process and devalue the quality of their product to make more short term unsustainable profits? Better yet,
Yep.
just borrow, since the money devalues anyway, at lower interest rates from banks and pass on higher interest rates to the consumer. The central bank will bail out the corporation anyway. And even if the corporation goes bankrupt, it'll be acquired and bought by a bigger corporation. The expansion of the money supply is the main driver for this whole process of corporations getting bigger. So
Yeah,
I love that
and
tweet. What do you think about that?
yeah, it's great, and it's on point. I mean, most of these big conglomerates, they don't even need to make profits. They don't aim to have profits. They aim to grow bigger, and that's the only
Mm-hmm.
thing, because they don't really need. They need a large revenue, but they don't really need profits. It's just going to be a tax burden for them. So they're acquiring other stuff for all that money that could have been used for other things. So yeah, it's very destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, the free market is still such a powerful force that the world works fairly well despite all this crap.
Mm-hmm.
But like what people don't get, like capitalism, this is a word that has been very diluted. But in praxeology, you differentiate between biological competition and catalactic competition. And biological competition is fang and claw. Whoever is the most powerful, physically powerful, wins, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a winner takes all game. You kill the other lion and you eat the antelope. And catalactic competition is the free market. So in catalactic competition is trying to provide customers with the best quality products for the lowest prices. And in that system, everybody wins, unless it's. But of course, we very rarely see any like pure example of either or. What we see is a mix between catalactic and biological competition in everything, since there's market interventionism in all markets everywhere. Taxes and inflation mostly. At the end of that, if you don't pay your taxes, you will have a gun pointed at your face saying "Go straight to jail." Go straight to jail, and so that is biological competition, and catalactic competition or capitalism is the opposite of that. It's like barbarism versus civilization. The civilized way of doing things is doing things consensually. Like if we agree to do something, that's the civilized way to do it. If we agree and then you choose to just do whatever benefits you the most by being violent to me, then that wasn't an agreement, that was mockery, and you're being barbaric. Which describes the state completely.
Yeah. And it just raises the overall happiness and prosperity because everyone's winning by definition. Like
Yeah,
when both sides
yeah.
win, happiness increases.
Well, both sides believe that they will win. Otherwise, the transaction doesn't happen. You can still make a
True.
bad
There's
trade,
some
of
risk
course. Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
So there's responsibility involved, but that's a good thing.
Yes. That's a great point because like they know they weren't robbed. They took a risk knowingly, and
Yeah.
I agree. That's definitely big. Um, Something I want to jump back to real quick. I know that we touched on this earlier. We were talking about how the current idea of environmental preservation and keeping the planet healthy has been completely stolen by the fiat powers that be. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but something that you talked about a lot, and I put this on Why Bitcoin Only as well, because I thought you had some really good early pieces talking about this. How Bitcoin is like the real solution to creating a more preservational world that takes care of the environment and the planet better.
Yeah,
And one of the tweets that you wrote, I saved here to use it as sort of a launching point. You wrote, if climate change is a problem, it must stem from overconsumption and a waste of natural resources. Why do humans overconsume and waste resources? Because of the incentive inflation gives us to spend rather than save. There is a solution to all of this, and it's Bitcoin. So could you elaborate on that a little bit? I love that.
yeah. I think I think I don't need to elaborate. It's all in that tweet.
It's a
I
good
mean,
summary.
it, yeah, like fighting any environmental problem with like ESG scores and stuff is like trying to heal cancer with a band-aid. Like the cancer is uh regardless of the magnitude of the threat, which can be debated as well. The solution is not more politics. Like politics is what mm, what got us into this situation in the first place. So that's like employing a known arsonist in charge of the fire brigade or a pedophile in the kindergarten. Like it's just um, resources get misallocated because we have inflation. If we didn't have, if you and you know this, if you're a Bitcoiner, you get closer to this notion of your things end up owning you, and when you know that you can just sit and wait for a while longer and you will afford much more, that leads you to the insight that you don't need that much stuff. Like stuff is not having a lot of stuff is not being wealthy, in my opinion. Like if you can get to that ties into my grandfather's saying, which I love, which is he said, "That which you can do without you own," which is the flip side of your things end up owning you. So if you don't crave a single fucking Lambo, you own all the Lambos because they don't own you. Like you own the ability to not crave them, and therefore you don't care about them. So they have no power over you. And that is very, very liberating to know that, yeah. I mean, as I said before, I've never been very materialistic, but Bitcoin has made me even less so. Then again, I have a family, so I have to have stuff. And there are other people in the family who want more stuff than I do because I basically just want a laptop and a toothbrush and a guitar, maybe. But the things I do want is to be able to travel whenever I want, wherever I want, and I want to eat well and drink well for as long as I live. But other than that, everything else is just unnecessary.
And this is such a universal mindset shift that pretty much all Bitcoiners go through. It just gets you to trim off all of the things that aren't really valuable to you, including
Mhm.
chairs. Like nobody needs chairs anymore. Sell all your chairs for more Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Uh, um, but this happens all the way up to the corporate level, to where corporations are extremely wasteful right now because,
yeah,
as we talked about earlier, like they don't have to be efficient and actually run well. They just need to grab more power. And so they're
yeah.
going to consume, just, I mean, Amazon right now, like, don't they have some sort of like incineration ward or something? All this stuff that they don't sell, they just destroy it or throw it in a landfill or burn it. Like, they don't
I don't know.
care. Like,
Yeah,
I forget exactly what it was, but I mean, and companies
yeah. But
polluting like crazy because it doesn't matter, like
you
creating
see
tons of
this on
trash no one
smaller
wants.
scales. Yeah, yeah. Imagine the amount of fruit that gets wasted in the supermarket or anything in the supermarket, basically, because they
Mm-hmm.
sell more if they can have more goods on display. And I think Bitcoin
Absolutely.
fixes that in the long run. Like, here's the thing I just thought of. Chairman of the board will have a different meaning on a Bitcoin standard or a post hyper Bitcoinization. It will mean the guy in charge of selling the shares. That's the
I love it. And that's such a great point to talk. It's funny you bring that up, actually. The amount of fruits and vegetables and just produce that just gets dumped. And like
yeah.
you can like look up pictures of just the mountains of produce that are gotten rid of every single day by basically every single big supermarket. You can even
Mhm.
walk around your local supermarket at the dumpster and take a look and see what you find. Like the amount of
A lot of
that shit
people
that's
do, I
wasted.
hear.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
people have to now because they're broke, and so this just goes around and around and around. But I don't know if you've delved into this rabbit hole at all, but I've been really deep in like the carnivore world, learning about the importance of meat
Yeah.
and how fruits and vegetables are kind of unnecessary, and they just end up producing garbage. And for me
Yeah.
personally, I decided to take the leap a few months ago to go full carnivore, like 95% strict. And I haven't wasted a single ounce of food in that entire time
Mm.
because it's
Nope.
so much easier that it simplifies your life down to where you just have your steak and you're
Yeah.
done. And you just like take
I
one out of the freezer, put it in the fridge, and you just go through and there's no waste involved.
yeah.
Meanwhile, when I used to eat tons of plants, like I ate, spinach and fruit and vegetables with every meal pretty much, a ton of that would just get thrown away because it goes bad so quickly.
Mhm.
And so it's just another way to trim out those inefficiencies. And Bitcoiners keep finding these
Yeah.
ways to trim out inefficiencies, which is why Bitcoiners are like all becoming carnivores. It's like a pattern.
I buy some of the arguments for carnivory, but I think it's also has a bit of this overcorrection that is so normal for humans. Like it seems like we have a pendulum swinging from one side to the other. When people, it's like people realize that the state is lying to them, and they immediately cling on to the most popular
Complete, most
conspiracy.
opposite they can find. Yeah.
Yeah, and carnivory is sort of like, okay, fucking vegans everywhere and they're annoying as hell, so now we're gonna go full carnivore. It's like it's the literal opposite of that. And I think the truth is somewhere in between the two. It's up to each and every one of us to find where what works for us, because like human bodies are similar, but they're not the same. And you can have like a tribe in India living on only vegetables, and you can have a tribe in on Greenland living on only seal meat and and such things. So I think the most common theme for humans is that we're adaptable. That's how we've survived. We learn and we adapt.
Yeah, well, I definitely appreciate like that perspective because there, of course, that's like a big one. Is like, are we going too extreme? Like, is this just how much
I
of this
mean,
is emotional? Like, just trying to be different and just cut away from the
yeah,
craziness. Like, of course, that's always part of the thought process. Just trying to
yeah,
find the best sweet spot. Yeah.
yeah. And I think
Mhm.
this very strict carnivory is it's a bit too much of a reactionary thing for me, and not actually uh you know it even from intuition, it doesn't feel like a very sound long-term thing for human beings. I mean, we have flat teeth and we have pointy teeth. Why not use both?
Well, you just inspired me. I'm gonna clip this and I'm gonna use this to get Safety on, and see what he has to say.
Yeah, he's gonna debate me. Yeah,
I'm ready.
we'll
Yeah, I
see.
love it. I love it. I
he's
mean,
he's gonna take the carnivory side for sure.
I just love there. And this is the funny thing is so many people look at the Bitcoin world and think that it's like this, this cult of everyone just repeating the same things over and over, but it couldn't be any different. Like we just found something that you and
Yeah,
I disagree on, and
yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm sure we could talk about it for an hour, and we're both very passionate about our beliefs, and it it's
Uh,
this world where like
it's
everything is fair game to discuss and like chat
yeah.
about and debate. I love
Yeah,
that.
well, it's not a passionate belief. Like, yeah, I've called Bitcoin financial atheism, which most Bitcoiners disagree with, because I think fiat is the system that requires belief and faith, and the Bitcoin doesn't. So that's somewhat controversial in some circles. But this is the thing: Bitcoiners are better at agreeing to disagree. And if you think about what Bitcoin is, it's just an agreement to disagree. Like we can run our own nodes and implement our own rules, even to a certain extent, at least, and we're agreeing to disagree. That's all it is.
Hmm.
Bitcoin is for enemies and for friends. So
And
yeah,
it's
I
yeah, and it comes from a much more respectful place than when you look out into the
yeah.
current fiat world where
You know what the
people,
difference is?
what is it?
Because like this is I think it was Farrington who pointed out that uh, Bitcoiners tend to know a lot about a lot of things, but it's actually the other way around. People who know a lot about a lot of things find Bitcoin. Of course, it is like, uh, and I think, and when, as you know, whenever you get into a conversation with other Bitcoiners, you know that they've done their homework and that they are not just pulling things out of their asses, and
Hmm.
therefore you respect their opinions more because you know
Hmm.
that they're coming from somewhere and they and that they're disagreeable to a certain extent and individualistic. So you know that they're not just bang whatever the rest of the flock says or being
Yeah.
parroting mainstream media or anything. Uh, but there is a what I find scary is that you also find characters who are parroting whatever's the meme of the day in Bitcoin instead, which is just basically the same thing as parroting whatever mainstream media says. So clinging on to dogmas are never good in my opinion. Like evolve for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that, though, that when you talk to Bitcoiners or when you meet Bitcoiners, you very often can feel pretty good that they've done the proof of work to learn at least the basics of what they're
Yeah,
talking about. And
yeah.
that's
At
why
least
you can go
the
to any Bitcoin meetup or conference and you're just going to see a higher IQ of person there than pretty much anywhere else I've ever been because
no,
people
no
are just sharp.
yeah, well, no Bitcoiner has an IQ over 80. You know that.
There's another meme. But I had a very interesting journey through. I'd actually love to hear yours as well. But for me, I went through a very extensive shitcoining phase, and I
Mm-hmm.
came out the other side completely just mind blown and just upgraded, and really just changing the way that I trusted people and the way that I looked at, who I was trusting and listening to. Because
Mm-hmm.
during that whole period, I was just watching YouTube videos and watching reels and kind of absorbing all the altcoin narratives that they just feed you and the confusion that
Yeah.
they sow about money and why Bitcoiners are bad and Bitcoin is, only one of many cryptos. So when I came out the other side of that, I really went through a phase of like, damn, I need to figure out what went wrong here, how I got tricked for like 3 years, and how I change my process of filtering down information to figure out what's real and what's worth listening to. And so many other Bitcoiners have been through a similar thing where they sort of jumped into this game bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. They got pulled into a scam here and there, or a lot of them. And if you make it to Bitcoin, you've been through the ringer of the information wars, and you've built a strong foundation. And
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of why you can trust their opinion more often. Typically, did you have an altcoin phase, or did you skip all of that?
I spent the enormous amount of $10 on shitcoins, and I put $1 into each and every one of them, to like the top 10, and
Yeah.
8 of them went down and 2 of them went up. And I thought, well, fuck this. I'm never going to know which one is going down and which one is going up. And I'm proud to say, even my first article about Bitcoin was about how unique Bitcoin was, and I put it as in the Independence Reimagined, which is the second part of this book. I wrote down something called the one shot principle, and that's my attempt at uh, making a principle about why Bitcoin is unique, and it goes something like this: absolute mathematical scarcity achieved by consensus in a sufficiently decentralized distributed network was a discovery rather than an invention. It cannot be achieved again by a network made up of participants aware of this discovery, since the very thing discovered was resistance to replicability itself. So the whole point is that we found something on the internet that can't be replicated, which is also why ordinals are retarded. Like the thing is, the Satoshi never leaves the network. It always stays on the network. It cannot leave the network. It's not supposed to. What leaves the network are the private keys. They're not on the network. So the private key unlocks a bunch of Bitcoin, and those Bitcoins are a representation of to which extent you, as the Bitcoin user, are allowed to change the state of the network. But that's all it is. And that's fine. That's what makes the Satoshi special. It makes it more than just data. It makes it exclusive data, which is something that humanity has never seen before. Everything else can be Control-C, Control-V. It can be copy-pasted. So, and I think it's crucial to remember that also, like trying to replicate that, it's it's self-explanatory that won't work. Because if you could replicate it, you could replicate it over and over again, and then the point is lost, because then you can Control-C, Control-V it. So the whole point is making something that is different. And the Satoshi is different. The shitcoins are not. They're the same. They're fucking scams. And also, even when you do shitcoining on Bitcoin, like this ordinals and inscriptions and BRC tokens and whatever they're fucking called, they use the arbitrary data that you can put into a Bitcoin transaction to form something like a JPEG or a shitcoin or whatever it is. But the thing is, the data is not connected to the Satoshi. It's connected to the transaction. So it never, the Satoshi leaves, and it's not connected to this arbitrary thing is not connected to that at all. And that's what people don't get. So if you send a Satoshi, sure, you can do chain analysis and see backwards where it came from. But as soon as it goes into a conjoined, for instance, that connection is severed. So if you want to keep that whatever monkey JPEG you just bought, you can never conjoin that Satoshi. So you made the Satoshi possibly worth a little less than it would have been if it didn't have the stupid monkey picture attached. So it's akin to owning a star in the Andromeda galaxy. It's there, sure, you can see it. Owning it, yeah, good for you. Everyone else can do exactly the same things with that star as you can, like, which is nothing. And the same goes for the time chain is open public knowledge. It's a public ledger. Anyone can see it. It's even more open than most other stuff on the internet. It's open to fucking everyone. So any arbitrary data on the time chain is public. If there ever was a public good, it's that. You know. So it's the least ownable thing you can own. You can't own it.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah, so this scam that has driven up the fees currently like right now, they are very expensive scams to run in the long run. So I expect these things to be temporary and then dropping again, because you need a bigger fool to sell these things. And yeah, there are a lot of fools out there, but there's not an infinite amount of fools.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I muted the word ordinals months ago, so I haven't really been following super closely.
No.
I value my time on Twitter.
Yeah, you've seen the fees go up, I guess.
Yeah, but I think this is a perfect example of, like, of course, like, nonsense will come in, but that's the reason maybe you could explain a little bit how junk like this naturally gets purged out through the monetary policy of Bitcoin. Could you explain that a little bit, so people, if anyone out there is, heard like, oh, ordinals are breaking Bitcoin, like, what do you say to that?
I mean, there are risks, and Bitcoin doesn't work if its users don't stay vigilant and run their nodes and are careful with what kind of code they run on their nodes. And also, like, if you're mining and you're connected to a mining pool, make sure that you know what that mining pool is actually doing, so you're not mining something that you wouldn't mine if you had the choice, because you do have the choice. And especially now with ocean mining popping up, which caused a lot of backlash, because people who make money from these stupid things are of course saying that ocean mining is censorship and they're doing bad things. But it's free market competition. I mean, Bitcoin is not in jeopardy. I don't believe that. But there are some people making money off of arbitrary things that it's unfortunate that they're there, because they're going to increase the size of the total size of the blockchain forever. Anything that gets put into a block that gets mined is there forever. So all this bullshit will stay there forever. And that's not a good thing. And people should differentiate between good things and bad things and act to prevent bad things. That's just what I think.
And to just help people not get scammed. It's like
Yeah.
something that's one of my main points that I really try to push, is like, I've been there. I got totally fooled by, all the shitcoins for a while. I had a whole, unlike you, I had like a whole separate blog that was about like crypto and like talking
Yeah.
about, which coin is going to be the silver to Bitcoin's gold. Is it going to be Litecoin, or is it going to be this or Bcash? Like, I was totally fooled. And like, after coming out the other side, you really look at it and say, damn, like, this is a really like powerful mind-changing machine. They have a ton of money in this. Like, I'm not an idiot. Like, I certainly felt like an idiot after that, but I mean, they're able to get really smart people fooled by these things. And rich people too. Like, there's a lot there. I mean, I've seen like the last year people, I mean, there are people at like the high level corporate level just completely getting sucked into these scams, which is crazy. Like, it's a truly, I think I'd be curious of your thoughts on this. It's a mix of everyone in the world knows that there's a problem. They don't really understand the problem, but they're really ripe for solutions being fed to them, and they're more susceptible to falling for things, even if they aren't airtight. Is that something you'd say as well?
Yeah, I'd say it's code salad marketed by word salad.
And a lot of confidence, fake confidence.
Yeah.
That was one of the big lessons for me, is like, these people were like so confidently talking about their shitcoin. Like, it's hard to really, that was one of the things that I really, had to think about afterwards. Like, damn, like, the fact that these people just really sounded like they knew what they were talking about, it got me. And people, you can see it every day. Like, the shitcoiners are so confident.
It goes back to first principles. You're like, if you think about it, how is, if you find out a way to stop people from replicating something on the internet, can you replicate that experiment? How does that make sense? Like, can you discover America twice? I mean, it's a discovery. It's pointless to try to copy uncopyableness. So a successful shitcoin would have to be so different from Bitcoin that it wasn't money at all. And Bitcoin isn't money either, by the way. It's way better.
So one of the things that you just threw in there, I'd love to highlight a bit here, is just the idea of scarcity in general. Bitcoiners love to talk about how scarcity is so important for Bitcoin, and also all the most important things in the world are scarce. The one that also is up there is time. Like, the time we have in our life is scarce. That's why it's so valuable.
Yeah, so Bitcoin is a perfect reflection of that, the scarcity of a human life. Time is money, if by money you mean Bitcoin. It literally is time. And it literally has its own clock, and that is regulating, like the 2 weeks decide how long the 10 minutes are, and the 10 minutes decide how long the 2 weeks are. You know what I mean? So that's how the difficulty adjustment algorithm and the time between each block are connected. Like, they can't be one without the other. And they're also the perfect representation of the scarcity of human life. But the scarcity in Bitcoin comes from the fact that you can't copy them. That's the whole point. If you can copy stuff, there's no scarcity. And so a blockchain can solve 2 out of 3 problems. The security, decentralization, and scalability. And you can only have 2 sides of the triangle. And Bitcoin is optimized for security and decentralization, which only one of these coins can be, because if there's a competitor to that, it's not different enough to ever have any chance of catching up with Bitcoin. So they have to sacrifice either decentralization or security. And by sacrificing one of those, you sacrifice the other as well. So they can scale, but so what? They're no better than Warcraft Gold or Linden Dollars or, Air Miles. It's someone.
And these utilities that they claim that they're filling are things that can just be done with better with a regular database. Like trying to
Since it's
decentralize it does
centralized
nothing.
anyway. Well, it's not decentralized. That's what people like. They claim that it's decentralized, but it's not. Absolutely not. If you have a board or like a centralized entity making decisions, it's not decentralized.
Mm-hmm.
So decentralization, and this word gets thrown around a lot, and I think it's so misused and so overused, because decentralization in Bitcoin is an unfortunate means to a greater end. And the greater end is the fixed money supply and sound money that is teleportable and uncensorable and all of this great stuff. That's the goal of the decentralization. Unfortunately, we cannot have that without decentralization, because the incentive to abuse the rules is too high. So that's why we need the decentralization. But decentralization for decentralization's sake makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Market structures will still be highly centralized, and that's a good thing for most businesses. I mean, there's nothing inherently evil with something being centralized as opposed to being decentralized. The thing is, money needs to be decentralized, because otherwise it will get abused because the incentives are too large. So it's unfortunate, but we need it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's just become a marketing term because it sounds like it can solve everything. And
Yeah, it's
all
word
the
salad.
and every one of the altcoin companies, they like you said, they're centralized because they have like a CEO and a developer team and the decision makers, but they need to be a little bit decentralized so they can keep marketing this buzzword that they know everyone's going to use to buy into it. So they're just stuck in this middle ground of gray area where they're never going to be useful. Like they're just going to be
No,
kind of bouncing around between centralized, decentralized. And this
it's
whole time, like all of these different altcoins are in a battle to basically against each other because they're all sort of doing the same thing, like Ethereum and Cardano and whatever all the smart contract platforms are. And the one that's going to win is going to be the one that just centralizes the most and says fuck this, and we're just going to centralize completely, because then that's when it'll actually become efficient and be able to go through their roadmap faster and do all these things
then
people
again,
want. So it's just going to end up a centralized thing anyway.
yeah, then again, then it's not a smart contract. Like, you just use a
Exactly.
normal programming language.
The whole point is lost from the
Now,
start.
code salad sold with word salad. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate that that's still going on to this day. It's such I would say just a powerful. I think they've done a great job with the scam, to be honest. Like it got me, it got so many people I know, And I've been working on them. That's why I made whybitcoinonly.com, because I was just angry at people just continuing to have this problem and to continue to
Yeah,
get tricked by it. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to stop
yeah,
arguing on Twitter. I'm going to build the most airtight possible resource that will walk people through every single step to understand
fan-
why none of the altcoins are worth your time and is Bitcoin only. And that's why you
fantastic.
made your books as well. I'm sure a big part of it, just to help people understand that.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm very proud to be all over that site. But you should add the Freedom Footprint show to it.
Oh, yeah, I'll have to
Yeah,
look into it. So after I finished the site, I needed a complete break from Bitcoin content for a while. That's like,
yeah, yeah.
5,000 hours of
Can imagine.
grinding. I was so burnt out, and I just like couldn't touch anything for months, but I'm just now starting to kind of like tiptoe back into it.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'll definitely check it out, but yeah, I'll put that in the show notes as well. That's super cool.
yeah.
Um, Maybe to wrap things up here, Knut. I know it's late for your time, so I don't want to keep you here too long. Maybe we could go through each of your books like we discussed. You can give the synopsis as best you can for each of your books, and I'll put links to all of them down to show notes. I know you don't have all of them on hand right now, but we can just go through the titles so you can kind of give people a summary and pull them into buying them.
Yeah, so as I said before, the first one I wrote is called Bitcoin Sovereignty Through Mathematics. The second one, which is the least known one, is called Bitcoin Independence Reimagined. Is where this one-shot principle quote is from. And I put those books together so it looks more like a proper book rather than two pamphlets. And I had a new foreword written by our buddy Prince Philip of Serbia. And so now they're one book. There's a foreword for the second book by Hodlonaut as well. So these are the first two books, and they basically I try to cover as many angles around Bitcoin as possible. It's I mean, the first book starts with a chapter called "Everything a Trade," which is basically, and this I'm very proud of that because I wrote that before I had done any deep dive into praxeology and Austrian economics. But it's basically just the basics of Austrian economics anyway. So happy about that one. And yeah, so these are the first two. The most known book is this one, Everything Divided by 21 Million, which is more philosophical in its nature. It's I like some of the chapters way better than some of the other chapters, so it's a bit it has its ups and downs, but the chapters that I'm really proud of for this one.
Like any good
And
stream of consciousness, it's a mix.
yeah, and I write from a very stream of consciousness in a very stream of consciousness way.
I
And
love it.
you can find if you go to Yoni Appleberg's YouTube channel, you'll find some of the chapters there. There's one about element zero, called "Did Bitcoin Just Change the Periodic Table?" I think Yoni changed the title of the video to that. There's another one, there's Everything a Trade chapter, and there's another one on why collectivists win elections. So all of that is in these two books here, or three books that are two books. They're available from bitcoinbook.shop. And the latest book I wrote, unfortunately I don't have a copy here with me right here, but it's called Praxeology, the Invisible Hand That Feeds You. And it's basically my attempt at condensing Mises, thousands of pages of Mises into a 130-page book, which is like an introduction to praxeology. A quite thorough introduction, but still an introduction. And all the economic examples in the book are based on Robinson Crusoe. So there's a Robinson Crusoe theme to the book, and I'm very
Awesome.
proud of that one. So
Love it.
and yeah, if I'm gonna do some more shilling, you can go to freedomfootprintshow.com or knutsvanholm.com. You'll find all my stuff, my talks and panels and t-shirts and coffee mugs and whatnot. And the pod, Freedom Footprint Show, go and check that out. We try to do 2 episodes per week, and we've done about 70 episodes at this point. We started on Infinity Day last year, and had a big Infinity Day special this year with a lot of guests. And yeah, we love doing it. And I never intended to be a podcaster, but now that I am one, I really enjoy that, mostly for just strengthening the bonds with the people in the network. It's mostly an ego thing, but I also love, like, you never know who'll listen, and ideas like we talked about before, that guy from Venezuela who fled the country with words in his head. If I had anything to do with that, I just want to put out as much quality content as possible and talk to as many interesting people as possible, because I think, like yourself, like, I think these conversations add a lot of value to a lot of people, so I'm gonna keep on having them.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's really just all about building that network of connections that are on the right path, really want to learn more, and have even debates and discussions about things like we did earlier. There's places where we disagree and just want to find the best truth we can to make a
Yeah,
better world. And we're all so aligned in that. So it's super awesome to connect.
yeah, and don't
I
miss
knew
Bitcoin.
Go ahead.
Don't miss oh, don't miss Bitcoin Atlantis on Madeira on the from the 1st to
Ooh,
the 3rd of
great.
March. It's going to be the conference of the year, I believe. It's a
Amazing.
great
I
lineup. So
keep hearing amazing things about Madeira, and that
yeah,
conference looks awesome. So great call
yeah.
out. Love it.
BitcoinAtlantis.com and code Knut for 10% off. It's going
Love
to
it.
be great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, well, it's been such a pleasure having you on, my friend. Thank you for doing this. It's been excellent. I knew coming into it that it was going to be impossible to have any sort of like clear path. So I'm glad because this is why we're both like the podcaster and not like the specialist guests, because we have just so many places our brain wants to go all the time. So I think it
Yeah,
totally fit that bill.
and
We covered so many random things. I love it.
yeah, and I think I love when these things are more conversational than just interviewee. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be conversations, I think. Yeah.
100%. 100%. Well, I'll fill the show notes with all those links to your books and the Yoni Appleberg videos and the conferences. There's so much good stuff to dig into, and I really recommend everyone to go read your books and your articles even, because there's just so much great content there to dig into, and you really flesh things out super well. So I appreciate your work. For myself personally, I learned a lot. Uh, really expanded my Bitcoin brain, and we'll be in touch, my friend.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Yeah, we'll stay in touch. Take care.
Sounds great. See you later.
Thank you.